How far off are we?
Hey everyone, welcome to The Big Picture. Today I will be your leading co-host, Justine Wanda, and with me is award-winning journalist. Give us your name. Why are you pausing like you
waiting for more plaudits. I was like, hey,
I was going to do applause.
Umejaribu sana. Yeah, my name is John Allen Namu. Thank you very much for joining us. Usually there's a third person hapa katikati. Omwana wetu.
Yes,
Anaitwa,
and he skipped.
Yes, can you imagine?
Mukhwana, wherever you are, we see you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The poor baby has gone baby's day out.
Watch I enjoy.
Watch I enjoy too.
Yeah. And with us today in studio is the wonderful Dr. Wandia. She's an amazing professor. She has given a lot of insight on the education curriculum, and we're going to be having more of that discussion a little bit later on the show. But first, Dr. Wandia, before we begin, are you a fan of the World Rally Championships?
Sorry, no. No, I didn't. I didn't watch that. Yeah.
We were hoping you were like a secret.
No cars, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the World Rally Championships happened over the weekend. Before we get into that, what were you both up to on the weekend? Like, you can give us a fun update before we get into the topics of the week. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. you want to start?
Mine, you wouldn't believe it, but on Saturday I was doing I had taken students to the celebration of the Francophone Day. So that's where I was. And then Sunday I was just trying to catch up with life. Yeah.
You know, we see your updates, and there's so many about your students. Like, how much time, like outside of class, how much time do you spend with each cohort, each class? Because every time we see like you're updating, or our students have done this, there's been this great debate in class. So how much time do you spend doing that?
I read a lot before class, even for classes that I've taught for many years. I try to update, and I try to think, how can I relate what I'm going to say today with what the students are seeing out there? So, and then when I get to class, then I ask them, what do you think? And then they tell me about their lives, but they also tell me what they think about whatever is happening.
What's happening? Have you ever had a student surprise you with an answer that you would have expected perhaps from your academic peer or even beyond? Like, you've just, you're asking a question and then you're just shocked by the answer, and you're like, how erudite, how well thought out.
All the time.
Really?
In fact, that's the norm.
It's a norm.
It's the norm. It's the norm for students to give you such brilliant insights.
Really?
So they've kept me young in that sense. When you see me, even the things I say, it's because I am sharpened by the students. Yeah.
Okay. Well done to Dr. Wandia's class. Yeah,
Exactly.
Well done. You guys
Those are great students. And how do we sign?
students.
Yeah, and you, Jan.
Huh?
What have you been
on
up
my
to?
weekend?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, this was a sporting weekend for me, but not WRC and not Kenya Gabon. Kenya Gabon, I thought we kind of had in the bag, so I wasn't even paying attention. But on Saturday, so I used to play rugby, decades, centuries ago. And I used to play for Nondi's RFC. And so there's a derby between Nondi's and Kenya Harlequins that every time we play, it's like Man U Arsenal, like the equivalent in terms of the electricity, the energy,
Big difference.
Oh,
That's,
yes. There was a proper, there was a line.
What?
Man, kuliko ya kura. Like, it was almost around the field. The guys are just lining up there with bowls. It looked like a scene from Oliver Twist. It was so funny. Yeah, but Ombachi did well. It was a really nice weekend. Really nice weekend, yeah.
Those are nice updates.
Very nice. Positive, There have to be reservoirs of positivity in a country like this, just so that you can survive.
Yeah, super wholesome. So before we get into the topics, I was just going to jump over my very nice weekend.
Yeah, okay.
A couple of nice things happened over the weekend. I was on the closing plenary for the What Women Want Summit by Pinky Gelani. she's an amazing host. I was there last week doing a little bit of a panel, and like 12 people attended. And shout out to those 12 people.
You were saying it so neat. Those are 12 people who wanted to see Justine.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Big
those
up
12
yourself.
people really
Yeah.
hyped me up. And then this year I was able to do the closing plenary, and I was there with Janet Mbugua and Pinky, and we had a really important conversation on how older generations of women and younger generations of women can collaborate more and like help each other out, not just economically, resource-wise, socially, in every single aspect. And that was really dope.
Very cool.
And also, at the end of it all, today morning, while I was asleep and like enjoying my life, a link was sent my way that one of the works that I've recently written for TV was nominated for the Africa Magic Viewers Choice Award.
Hey, well done. Congrats.
Yeah, so
Why were you trying to jump over this news? This is significant. We should dedicate half an hour.
Yes.
Right? To this news alone. Congrats, man.
Thank
That's
you
big
so
news.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well
Yeah.
done. Hey,
I
Justine.
appreciate it. I was
Eh?
like trying
Angalia,
to be
she's
humble.
entering the ground.
I was trying to be humble, you know.
Well in. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
thank you so
Haya,
much.
tuko na nini leo?
So before we get into the topics of
Yes.
the day, our viewers are going to watch a trailer for Blocked at the Bar, which is Africa Uncensored's documentary on, it takes an in-depth look on the Council of Legal Education, the massive failure rates, and I think it's at 53%.
53% failure rates, and apparently this has been an improvement. We were speaking with Barack off of the. It's an actual
improvement, yeah.
But that's still
There was a time it was at 66.
66%.
Yeah,
That's more than
two-thirds.
So,
yeah.
so Barack claims, maybe it's his year. So Barack's one of our producers. Maybe it was his year and alianguka, but he said it was 17% of the people passed.
Yeah.
So Barack will fact check whether it was your year or not. But I mean, on a serious note, it was a very emotional thing to watch. You know,
Yeah.
both as a parent, you know, to a prospective lawyer, maybe in the house, but also to all of these guys who have, you know, how you have your dream delayed, then deferred, but denied, you know, on the basis of something that structurally is an issue. That for me was like the big thing. Anyway, I mean, we've got the trailer on, so.
I think the issue at CB is it's not like this is the first time it's happening.
For years, law students have struggled to pass the bar exam, which is surprising considering the entry requirements. In order to study law, a student would need a C+ on average in KCSE with at least a B in English or Kiswahili. In order to even qualify for the advocates training program, they have to pass the pre-bar exam. So, these aren't exactly the kind of students you'd expect to struggle with exams now, are they?
The Kenya School of Law and the Council of Legal Education have rubbished claims that they have intentionally ensured students fail their bar exams.
But this time round, there's something that triggered the students to know there's something that has been happening behind closed doors.
So it is literally a public institution that preys on the very public it serves for its own survival.
So the issue of trying to make it as if we don't read or we're that stupid doesn't make sense.
People have actually come out in arms to question some of the policies in place. So the agitation just started. It's been there, but this is for the first time a multitude of students have actually come together to agitate as a group for the same cause.
I think the issue
So make sure you watch the full documentary. It's on YouTube's African page. It's called Blocked at the Bar. Speaking about the WRC championships, during the 2021-2022 rally, so the economic data shows that there was 38 billion in economic value, and it created about 24,000 jobs. But these were just seasonal jobs anyway. But that's a really big number of jobs. And also, they got up to 100,000 spectators.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Wait, this was last year or this year?
No, that was in 2021.
2021,
yes,
2022.
the last one has still not been
The
shared.
numbers are not out. Well,
Yes.
you know, okay, look, anything that brings positive attention to our country and, you know, helps deepen some sort of heritage in terms of sport, those kinds of traditions, I usually am very supportive of. I don't want to try and pour cold water on what's been happening behind the scenes with WRC, but there was a torrid time last year in terms of organization, in terms of even corruption from some of the organizing committees, etc. There was a threat that we might lose our WRC sort of like, what do you call it, hosting rights.
Yes.
But fortunately we didn't, and this year seems to have turned out pretty well, which I'm quite happy about. Like I said, anything that builds the legacy of a country in terms of one maybe area of specialization is a good thing. I'd hope for more, you know, local drivers, more of those legends that now we can, because there's that certain nostalgia that's attached to talking about Patrick Njiro, Sheka Meta, all of these guys that we used to watch when we were growing up. But I'm seeing that there's also some new people here.
Yes.
There's, who was it?
I think there's a mother-daughter
That's so cool.
team
Yeah.
that
Tinashe.
really dominated some of the races.
Really?
Tinashe
Tinashe,
Gatimu
yes.
and Caroline Gatimu.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Very
They were the
cool.
only women-led team at
This
the
year.
2025. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, that's very cool.
It's really cool.
That's
Yeah.
very nice.
And on Women's History Month, so that's really,
For
it's really
sure.
dope to see them. do that.
Naona kuna mtu hapa tumekuotiwa. Someone called Ken Mugo. Ken, you can take the rest of the month off. The guy used to sell 5 to 8 goats over a weekend. By the time rally ilianza, order ilikuwa tuwekea mara na pilipili ya ubari. The guy has sold goats. He can't even believe. He was very excited.
Oh.
But it's good. I mean, those are the sorts of things that you want to hear. Those are the sorts of like positive stories that you want. And you know, if we were to segue even into football,
Yes.
right? With the Gabon match, I watched the highlights. Actually, one clip of the highlights when we equalized 2-2 when we were playing in Gabon, and the commentator's description of Mohamed Bajaber. Did you see it? He was speaking in Arabic. It was so beautiful, so poetic. Oh, Mohamed Bajaber, bless, I don't know what. I was like, what? This guy, hey, even me, I'd wish like I just do something, then the guy's just chopping highlights.
I think one of my favorite things is to watch either the highlights or watch football commentary in different languages. There's, I think, someone in Vietnam who had done commentary for, I think, the Asian League.
Yeah.
And there's a point where he just started singing. And it's one of the funniest things. Like, he was singing about, like, them not being able to score. So, like, the translation is not as funny as the clip itself.
As the clip,
yeah. And I think we should do more international silly commentary on sports. I think it's probably going to help with the language barrier, or what do you think?
But sport is a unifier,
Yeah.
Did you watch the Gabon game?
No, I
Kenya
didn't watch
Gabon.
it. I didn't watch the game.
What, heartbreak?
I cannot watch football live
oh, really?
anymore. I've outgrown it. I get too nervous. I'm just like, when is it going to end? Are we going to win?
You know the time that there was a time
can't.
the Super Eagles played in Kenya.
Yeah.
It was a big time when Reinhard Fabisch had just become the
Yes,
coach.
I was there at the stadium.
Oh, you were in the stadium?
Yeah, I
So
was
we were
there.
watching at home. And like we've gathered around the TV and there was this hype around Reinhard Fabisch
Yeah.
and the stadium was packed.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah.
Then Kenya scored.
I
Like pandemonium
remember.
in the house. Do you know what Michael did? The guy went and switched off the TV. He said, we are not watching this match. If we watch it, we'll jinx it.
Yes.
And true to
Yeah.
form, when you switched back on, 1-1.
Yeah,
Like Aisha.
I
Oh,
remember.
man.
I
Yeah.
remember.
Oh, you were in the stadium.
I
How
was
cool
in the
was that?
stadium. I used to go to the stadium those days.
Really?
Yeah.
Hey, that must have been exciting.
It was thrilling. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man.
I enjoyed
Hey.
it.
Anyway, to the 30,000 guys who went to support our boys, well done to you. I mean, that's again, that's really the way you start to build a culture around, you know, sporting events.
Very much.
Yeah,
I think one of my favorite moments about this particular game, this exact one, was it sold out so quickly, and everyone was so intentional about supporting the national team even after the results.
Yeah.
Like everyone was still like, your game has improved. I think the new coach is doing really well. The FKF had
Hussein
a new
Mohammed.
chairman, and I think the new team that they're assembling is also honoring the sport a little more, and I think that's what was so beautiful. And also shout out to all the Ruto must go chants. We have to stay on message regardless.
Just endelea.
One of the things that this country continuously suffers from is corruption. It's everywhere. It's it destroys such a big fabric of the nation. A lot of people love sports. A lot of young people love sports. If you go to like those Shags teams, it's like crazy. There's people there almost every weekend. People are in sleepers playing football, and they have so much support. And if you think functional and people are paid on time, it's the corruption that is so much prevalent. You guys remember when they were running with Uhuru the first time, and there's like, in 6 months' time, the stadium in Wote will
No, but
be
they said that both times, in 2013 and in 2017.
Exactly.
Tracy Bonareri has like a really good story a series called Stuck in Overtime, where she looks at some of these stadia that haven't been completed and the various reasons and the various owners. Like there's one that she did on Karatu Stadium in Kiambu. And part of the ownership of the company that was contracted to build was none other than who? Moses Kuria and his brother. And this is at the time when he was the trade minister, right? It doesn't get completed. And then, like, the audacity of some of these guys was that it will be completed in time for the Moses Kuria Cup. Like, you understand? Like, you start to personalize like national projects that are sub hundreds of millions, delayed projects, etc., that you have lying in the wake of all of these promises around sport. That if we just did right by our sports people, or if we just did right by everybody, there'd be so much we could do. And it doesn't take like enormous leaps in terms of our thinking, etc. It's really just doing the things that we're supposed to do constitutionally, that you're mandated to do, you know. But anyway, we could talk until the cows come home about this.
Yeah.
But it's also, if people are occupied by sports, where will the politicians get the young people for the rallies? Who will they hire? That's really what it's about.
That's
you can't have young people busy doing something that is not for a politician. That's, I think, the basic principle.
You can't have a productive young person.
Yes,
because
that's the word.
Because then they have a stake in the country that when they demand, there's actually some legitimacy behind the demand. But if you're unemployed during the week and someone comes and says, like, remember those pictures that we saw from Miss Lee, you know, a couple of weeks ago?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember it's so interesting how just 2 years in passage of time can change your perspective. So 2022, those pictures were being, the perception is like, what are these guys doing in the middle of the week?
Yes. Exactly.
You know, and they have nothing to do. So what an astute point, Dr.
People should not be that much outside. It should be more intentional, not because you want them there and you can use them however. And we've seen over the last couple of weeks that using of unemployed or disenfranchised youth to met violence against other citizens and just like weaponize unemployment in very, very horrible ways.
A question was being asked by one of the people in studio. So William Ruto is set to tour Mount Kenya as well. So are we going to expect more of the same in a place that is no longer like his, what do you call it? There's this well-worn phrase that we like to use in journalism. It was you actually who were saying, you know.
Should be working, not just doing a campaign tour in the middle of a work week. So
actually,
exactly.
Daktari, I want to ask you about that, right? So people say that William Ruto is not working, he's campaigning. But given the nature of our politics, right? And if you are looking at it typically from the way our politics are sort of like, you could say, developed or degenerated, isn't then what he's doing very typical of a politician who is supposedly working. Isn't that work for a politician?
Yes, when your sports is not working, your education is not working, your economy is not working. So instead of fixing the sectors and making them work so that during the week people are in their stations, now you have to go to them when they're where they are at the markets, lying up, I mean, just hanging about. Then you have to go and meet them there. So it's a product of our economic, social fabric that people are not occupied. They're not occupied doing things that are beneficial. Yeah.
To the economy.
Yeah, so that's now, then that's what politics is. And I suspect that they want it that way because if you're going to farmers, if you're going to sports people, if you're going
earlier, blocked at the bar, I think it speaks to the same kind of disenfranchisement by the system. We see continuously how there's a crisis in the education sector as a whole, but this particular documentary focuses on the legal education in Kenya. So CLEs has a massive failure rate of 53% apparently. You said it was at 66.
66%, yeah.
Which, if it even has gone lower, is still too high.
Yeah.
And I would like you to jump in here, Professor, considering how, like, a lot of students are very excited to go to university. Your parents are paying money. You're going to be into school to study, and you're failed, and then there's no way for you to verify why you failed, or they confused you with a student with a similar name. It feels very by design to fail students. And I would like you to kind of delve in a little deeper on what this means for students who are in law school right now, for students who've been disenfranchised in this way, and is what CLE doing even legal?
Actually, this thing has a long history. You know, the first African lawyers were admitted to the bar in Kenya in the 70s. So the model of a lot of professions is if you keep the professionals fewer, you can charge higher fees for services. You can also exploit the younger professionals because they need to be your interns in order to get a foot in the profession. So it's actually a gatekeeping problem. It's really very simple. It's a gatekeeping problem that makes the senior advocates make more money than they might have made. If you are a rural person, there's no lawyer around you, so you have to travel to the city and be exploited. You can't follow up even with payments. You can't follow up because it means a trip to town. It's that kind of thing. So it's a gatekeeping mechanism to keep those already in making more money and exploiting those who are trying to get in.
Can we stay on that exploitation? You know, their time as in pupillage, that you're babysitter, right? And yet you do the donkey work in terms of the research, etc., preparing briefs for your your managing partners to go to court, and then when you question it, it's like it's always been that way. It's like a kind of hazing, almost like a rite of passage in a sense, right?
Yeah, and it's, sorry to say, it's cruelty.
It is.
The Kenyan mindset is power through cruelty. So the more pain you can inflict on people and the more you make them suffer, the more powerful you feel. That's really what is going on, and it's in every sector. That's part of the corruption.
Is the root colonialism?
The root is colonialism, but it's also a lack of philosophy. We like that. People feel that you're only powerful if you can inflict pain. But the most powerful people, I think, in the world are those who opened their doors and opened their arms and nurtured people and had influence. So it's a philosophy of power that we got from colonial times that we have never questioned. It's still there.
Hangovers. On this question of philosophy, before Justin, you jump back in. So, at the philosophical level, Daktari, then what are they supposed to represent if this is the system that they have to go through? Like at that level, do you think that there was any thought as to like the product at the end of the day?
No, there wasn't any thought. I would have liked to see a lawyer mindset where the focus is on people, on helping people, on making the system work, on making people's interaction with the law and with conflict as seamless as possible. So you're helping people, but the mindset seems to be prestige and money. So when you can extract money from people in such cruel ways, then you become prestigious and powerful. Religion, it's about tastes. What do we find beautiful? What do we find lovely? What do we find excellent? For us, it seems to be access to exclusives. What we need is a difference important than the car you drive, the club.
Everywhere.
And I think it's
Yeah.
very prevalent, not just from a very systemic point, but even like in our families.
Yes.
Literally, the rich
yeah.
uncle, rich auntie exists.
Oh, yes.
But shout out to my rich uncle. That's maybe catching.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
essentially,
Yeah.
I will say from my point of view, I got very lucky. I had a rich uncle who, it was like, I can only align with you if you're willing to railroad a bunch of people. And to him, that made no sense. So the fact that he was welcoming to us was the anomaly in the family. And that inspired, again, values that I have now, because I believe helping people does not set me back. If anything, if all of us can go together, then we don't have to keep sharing like 2,000 bob among each other. Yeah, because now everyone will be able to not just take care of themselves, but take care of other people. And just so as we jump into, then is an absolute.
Yeah, in fact,
Indeed.
some of your exact words, right? So
Yeah.
put us educators off by giving us the quote-unquote learned friend thingy. I got a copy of the Ojambo report. The Ojambo report, of course, looked into the pass and fail rates, with the CLE and the Kenya School of Law. And it was just not helpful. It said nothing about teaching, about the actual skills that the students lacked to make them fail, about the exams themselves, and nothing about the curriculum. Like you said a bunch more, but let's just dig into that for a moment. And again, just going into the question that you were saying, that we always ask for what, but we never say, are we doing this? Then we are doing this because we are getting CLE first, and then
Okay.
CBC. Then now
All right.
we'll jump in. Yeah.
You see, the way I was taught is the failure rate this high? That was not asked about the CLE results. We were just told, in fact, it was very vague. And then you see what should happen is that after you explain that this skill was missing, if you want to blame the students, let's just say the students were not good. Then you have to ask the question, what is the problem? Is it that they are not taught? Is it that they lack the station of these results? We did not get anything. I don't remember the details, but I was really disappointed that nobody interrogated those results. The second thing I noticed was that this is called the Council of Legal Education. At the time when I was looking it up, there were no legal educators in the board.
At all.
People whose specialization is to look at how are we teaching law, what are the results we are getting, what's with the curriculum, is the curriculum adapted to our niche, not even education. You ask their pitch what was the
attempt to fail people because of the amount of money that you can charge with receipts. You don't get access to your past papers. A brilliant point was made about access to information and then the Data Privacy Act in that documentary, that if this data belongs to be like a tangible implication on where it is at.
You have almost like a capacity to advocate for yourself, which on the flip side, CBC students do not. They have to have their teachers and their parents and the education system as a whole standing in that gap, continuously asking the right questions, as you've said, and making sure we are interrogating the teaching, interrogating what the future would look like, and continually shaping that curriculum in that way. So I'll say this is one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Like
because
Justine has been begging us to have this topic on. Finally.
yes, I have begged. So one of the biggest issues, actually there's so many issues, but one of the big already, we have a pathway to capitation that is direct to school, removes any kind of middleman, the whole e-citizen issue, and also the continuous disenfranchising of principals who have had to go and beg vendors and suppliers, especially in boarding schools, to be, like, they use their own goodwill to be like, please, please, my students are coming on this day, I really need them to be in class, I want them to be well fed, and I want them to be taken care of. We are not even going to be able to pay our staff, but please, please, kindly, I will sort you out in 2 months. And the government is like, we've already sent out capitation. First term is ending in 2 weeks. The capitation is kesha, which means they're not sleeping. But at the same time, I just wanted you to be able to take us through if there's a possible pathway to direct to school capitation and what that would look like, so that we avoid the continuous disenfranchising and under-resourcing of kids.
Wow, that one is out of my league. I don't know much about the economics and funding of
CBC.
Not even CBC, of education. Let me just start with a philosophy problem. Everything goes back to philosophy. How important is education to us? And then from there, once you decide how important is it, then you say what are our going forward when it comes to other things, and how does education compare to those things? I think we've been investing a lot in education for the most part. The problem is something else. So you promise we are going to build this road, we are going to build this thing, we are going to build this thing, but our children are not being able to finish law school and practice. They're not being able to get into the economy. And you see, through the getting into the economy, now the economy can grow. And then now we can have the money to fund the school. So really what is happening in Kenya, at least in my very pedestrian opinion, is that the economy is not growing, and so we don't have the resources to fund the schools. And then once schools are begging, you can now, put many blocks through which before the money can reach the schools. And then at each stage, people are taking a bit and taking
Charging
a bit.
rent.
Charging rent. So you create a rentier system for funding the schools. And that's why now you have principals suffering like this. So it's a systemic problem about what are we doing with our educated young people. Are they growing the economy? Unfortunately, they are not.
I have the same question that I asked about lawyers, because you studied now the CBC system from an academic point of view.
Yeah.
What is the student who comes out of CBC supposed to look like? Because I think that's the concern for many parents. Like, I had my kids in CBC. When you study the CBC, what is it supposed to produce, and what is it producing now?
And just to piggyback on that, I think we were having this conversation earlier on how it's stopping people from creating CBC as it is now would mean for people who end up getting stuck or want to restart. Yeah.
That's a very hard question, because what parents want is not what the government wants. Let me just put it out there. That's really what's happening.
Yeah.
Okay, what does a parent want? A parent wants to know that their child can enter the economy. Skills, and I'm not talking about the technical knowledge, but the basic intellectual skills to manage any economic sector they go into. So just learning things like salary, boss, HR, these general things that apply to all sectors, regulation, law, taxes. So you want a child who, they may not know the substance of it, but they know how to parent. Now, the government that's where the problem is the government, because they are looking at young people who come out of the system as either civil servants or what the heck do we do with these young people? They don't have a broad vision of citizens as creative, as entrepreneurial, as service, as innovators, and then all of them plug into the economy in their...
Where people either are part of the system or subsist off of the system.
Exactly.
But not grow the system.
Hey, you're the one who knows. That's exactly it.
I'm just summarizing what you're saying.
That's exactly it. So you either have people in the system or people who are subsisting on the outskirts of the system. So what now CBC was saying, the system, so that we don't make the ambitions too high, but let's just give them some minimum something which can make them subsist.
Yeah.
And then the people who make it through the pathways and through the different tiers, then those ones will now enter the system.
Mwalimu, do you...
That's how it is.
Okay, and I'm asking this now devil's advocate question. Do you genuinely think that there are people in policy and people in leadership who are so diabolical as to purport to create a system that leaves out the majority in this way? Do you think that that actually is what is happening, or this happened just by coincidence?
Because you never question. I would hear echoes of it happening long before CBC, when I would hear, because I did the A-level system, I would hear my colleagues saying that 844s are not, what would they say? They are not quality, they are not, I can't remember what they used to say, but it indicated to me that we don't want many students passing through the system. And in fact, actually, we started a hashtag, tyranny of 3PC, because somebody was telling us that when they went to the university, the first lecture, the lecturer came and said, all of you, you can't all pass, only a third of you are going to pass. He announced it from the go. So there's a value in Kenya that if you survive a cutthroat system, you are quality. It's not that you're abused and traumatized. It's the ministry officials are really not thinking. They're saying, yeah, but this is how we have quality. We have to make sure that the people who pass are the real ones. But, you know, that's not really what is happening. What you're doing is excluding people from the system and then calling the few who make it the quality people.
But doesn't that then borrow from or is like looking at it through like a cracked mirror, this evolutionary theory of the survival of the fittest?
It
right?
is.
So meaning that the people who pass through this sort of, you know, this system that funnels and continually shapes and shapes should come out as being refined, almost like you're producing a diamond.
Yes.
But then why don't we have diamond systems? Why don't we have diamond leadership, diamond, you know,
Platinum.
Yeah.
But
Yes, but you get the point, right? Yeah.
Okay, the thing I think I'll just like say something before Dr. Wandia says. One of the things about being in this system is like survival kind of breaks you. You're continuously always looking not to drown.
Yeah.
Am I learning enough? Do I know enough? And then when you're in high school, you think if you pass exams, that's it. You'll go to a good school, you'll become a doctor, they will pay you what you're worth, and maybe you can just cruise the rest of your life trying to just navigate the little things, raise your kids, and you know, like call it a day. But then, if you're someone who's gone through the system, and you see what is happening to doctors right now.
Yeah.
Because I remember last year, I was out with the doctors when they were protesting. And I was standing with this lady, and she was like, I studied so hard. I said, it has wasted 2 years of my life. Out of it. Like, her words very much felt like drowning. It felt like someone needed to do the right thing so that she doesn't need to be in that position.
Yeah.
And I remember just standing out there and like we were chanting, and I was like just trying to be, you know, like be in community with them. But it was a reflection. If I ever tell my nephew or my niece, oh, you want to be a doctor? Yes, study hard, you'll get there. I'm lying to them. You'll get there, and then what? If we cannot guarantee some kind of security in every sector of life, regardless of your profession
Yeah.
and your educational background, we're not building anything. And I don't know if Dr. Wanda, you share the same sentiments, or if there's a way to like stop building survivalist systems again and again, not just CBC, not even with the higher education funding model, not with doctors not being able to get jobs. Like, is there a pathway to building not a survival system? Yeah.
It goes back to tastes and values in the broader sense, but one of our fundamental problems is our elite. Our elites are people who do not create, they do not build, and their access to wealth is the state. Being able to join politics and get a CS position or get licenses or tenders. Anyway, everything is built around the state. So we don't have enough of an elite who have built wealth through sheer hard work, ingenuity, who employ people when they get wealthy. Not even, I mean, like if you build a factory and you employ people, so even though you are you're the one who owns the factory, you have also employed people. We don't have that kind of an elite. So what happens, and this started from the Jomo years. I mean, that family is wealthy, but what have they made? What ideas have they come up with? What ingenuity have they done? So what happens is, first of all, it means that all sectors are shrunk by these elites. They shrink them so that nobody becomes wealthy through farming on their own ingenuity without having access to, what do you call it, the title deed and, you know, special place in the marketing. No, whether you're talking farming, law, medicine, anywhere, fashion, music, there's always sort of like a cap, a ceiling, beyond which Kenyans cannot go. Because once you start going beyond that ceiling, KRA starts visiting you, you start getting threats from the local MP. There was a crazy story I had many years ago of somebody who innovated a prototype. And he got 2 visits, one from KRA and the other one from the MP who promised to kill him if he develops the prototype. This is what's happening across all sectors, that you reach a certain ceiling and then you start being a political threat. So you either are co-opted, just chill, and you don't excel.
You lie low like an envelope.
You lie low like an envelope. So what happens now is that because of this chaos in every sector, young people who are coming through the school system, they're like, let me just keep quiet, let me not challenge anybody, let me work hard. Because I've been told if I work hard and I pass and I become a doctor, all my problems are solved. But you see, they've not understood, no, it's not like that.
That's what they
And you see
That's
the
what they
bar has been getting lower and lower and lower because from the 60s to the 90s, we didn't have enough doctors, we didn't have enough teachers. And then Kenya was getting money from the World Bank without very stringent conditions because, the USSR and what. So that changes in the 1990s, and now we start being told, stop subsidizing your healthcare, stop subsidizing farmers, education, and all that. Manufacturing. So the bar now becomes even lower. So what is happening is that this generation of graduates is hitting that ceiling earlier than when I was going to school, because when I was finishing my BEd at KU, I already had a posting. So you see, I hadn't yet hit the ceiling. So I get my posting, then I can't. You know, I'm being told no commission of X, much younger than
The mean, you know, but have explained the June 2024 protests within this context. Is that a result of, or just a generation that has grown up self-educating in other ways? Is this just something
It
totally
is.
different.
It's a reaction to that. You see, what the finance bill did was that it was saying, you can't even start a business. We'll tax you even before you've started. If you think even of a business, we are coming for you. So I think there was a way in which, so yes, I was not, let me just say, I was one of the few people of my generation, I was not surprised. I've been always feeling that this moment is going to come because of my own students. My students graduate full of promise and ideas. And then 3 years later, you meet them, they started being allowed to develop, or the ideas are stolen and developed and they get no pay for it. So what happened in June, that's exactly the economy I'm talking about. There is a ceiling that we seem not to be able to rise through because we have an elite who are threatened by excellence and success and innovation and all those things because they are where they are through deals. So anybody else who can make wealth or power through other ways is a threat to
Are being encouraged to share labs, libraries, and even teachers. To be able to split yourself to do multiple impact you will have to your students. So that is a thing I'm grappling with, especially with CBC, where schools that are under-resourced are being told you can share these people. We already don't have enough teachers to go around. But I don't know what that would feel like for you as someone who sits with your students and you have all these very important discussions, not just to educate them, but so to understand how you can better contribute to their lives. So I don't know what you have to say about how many hours in a day you will have to do to be able to timeshare between schools.
You can't. Teaching is a very emotionally draining job. Even teaching one class, you just feel so finished. So to do it across schools, and you're teaching children in different circumstances, you can't. It's also going to affect the mental health of teachers, and then we're going to see this cruelty that teachers meet out on children, and then we wonder why.
Why is it happening?
Why is it happening? It's such a cruel system that is not treating teachers and kids as a system, which is, let's keep people quiet with some basic education that looks like a system, so that when at the next election, I have something to say, I've spent 25% of my budget on education, this number of children have left and have graduated, but reduce your manifesto to numbers.
It's such a great point that you make. Barack again and I were wording this, and this is something that has happened before. It's 2 weeks to the end of the school term. Students have not yet gotten their textbooks for CBC.
Yes.
Right? So what quality of education are you talking about? And someone in our comment says this. So Olado Ulos says, it's about passing that enables you to get a good government or private sector job, but that's not the case, right? The fact that one needs to have a job, agree with this, right? Yeah. So I think there's this acceptance in a sense that the kind of education system that we are creating is producing a certain template of, even in the near future, what kind of conversation do we logically expect to have if I'm prepared for? It's being sold, it's snake oil salesmanship in a sense, and I feel that it's really, it's a very painful thing to have to endure as a teacher. Now, as a teacher, Dr. Wandia, you've spoken about these things for a while. How popular are you within the academic fraternity? I've always wanted to ask.
I don't think
do you have friends who...
No, I
they don't.
When you speak the truth, you forget about friends.
Forget about friendship.
I don't have enemies, but what I have, gosh, it is...
We are re-traumatizing it.
I just have learned to manage my circle. I teach the syllabus. So the people I interview on my channel are my way of venting and saying, another world is possible. People are researching about it. can I talk about the research that excites me? Because, you know, like with the graduate students, they are so bored by research, and me, I'm excited by it, by the things that I read. So I look for these researchers and I talk to them about their work. So that's what keeps me. This is why we are and this is why we are teaching it. So I tell them both sides. I hope my students will agree with me. Maybe you should interview with them. But that's basically my approach. I think also when you have sort of like a human view of the world, you realize that you're working in contradiction. So you don't get too upset about
That's very noble. Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of times I'm asked, because I also do a lot of, well, I wouldn't call it, well, teaching in a sense, right? So we go from different places across the country talking to early career journalists, trying to give them the foundations, etc. And one of the recurring questions that I'm constantly asked is, like, don't you get frustrated when you do a story and nothing happens, right? I think we've even had a debate about that with you, about, you know, there's something that you're not recognizing about. I think the debate was about the emotional connection with the intellectual, right? But the answer that I give is, you know, sometimes you're building a stack of wood for a match to, you know, to be lit, and that ignites impact. But other times what you're doing is building a library. And a library is not, you know, a library is not the most popular place, right? It's not the place that people go to at first instinct. But when they want to return to themselves or they want to research something, there is where your work will be. So I guess in a sense, Maisha Kazini, that's the name of your channel, right? Is that library that you build. And I think we should encourage people in all different professions who feel this way, build those libraries so that people can come back to them.
And I think it's a pouring back into the community where people start feeling that there's a space for them to do the same. Usually, sometimes you just need a mirror. You need someone who can reflect that this is possible, and then you stop thinking myopically. Again, you stop being so short-sighted about these things. And before we wrap up, because I think our time is almost up, I think one of the things I wanted to speak to, especially about the CBC curriculum, is how the books are just, like, some of the terms are like rolling out so fast, the books are not even out yet. They don't know what the curriculum is for the next class. And then the books can't be shared. Like, if I could use if I use the book this year, next year, if you have like a child in a class,
you have to buy again. It's so predatory. And look, me, I've gone through this, right?
Let the parents speak.
So no, I'm just jumping on your question. But it's not just that the books aren't ready, or that the books can't be shared, or that the books themselves, you know, speak to this. The content in the books, it's so frustrating to have to sit and argue with your child. This is the correct spelling for this. This is the right answer to this. We did that numerous times with our two boys, right? We did that numerous times. You know, like, you're like, oh my gosh, this is wrong. And then you go and hear them in the classroom, because, you know, I really pity and feel for the teachers. They're given content that they know, and they've barely gone through it. They know that parts of it is wrong, but they're so overwhelmed that they can't do anything about it. So half your life, I guess, in a sense, it, you know, if you're looking at silver linings, half your life then is spent re-educating your children and having that engagement. So for me, that's a positive that I'm taking away from it. You're not outsourcing all of the education to a teacher, but it's the reason why I'm being forced to do this that I have a problem with. Anyway, you had a question in there na nikaingilia, and I've ruined it. Please ask your question.
Lazima tuache wazazi waseme, you know, like they're the ones paying fees. But the curriculum changes. I think it affects the quality of learning in the long run. But also, what's really frustrating about the CBC system too, it's very classed. If your kid has access to resources, they're probably going to fare a little better. Probably. I say probably because they don't even have the curriculum for like the JSS students complete. The senior school system is probably going to remove math. They're like, you don't need math anymore. So you know how to do 1 + 1. Like, it's like they're just like sending you out into the wild. And I think a lot of people who are like math geeks math is very important. Math helps you think critically. Even if you're not very good at the subject, you can kind of apply that knowledge some way. And just to kind of bring it home, with curriculum changes and a classed education system, 844 was not that any better. But poor parents don't have time to sit down with their kids and have probably that kind of conversation, because most of them have to work very long hours, very hard hours. And if you're doing physical labor, you're already exhausted. Or if you're the kid of a teacher, your mom has taught the whole day, your dad has taught the whole day, and then they come home and then they have to, and your parents is like, can I just like not do this? And
can I just watch some Netflix or something, just disengage for a moment?
And it's not because they hate their kids. It's like, I really cannot. I need some time to power down so that I can like set myself up for some kind of success tomorrow. And I would like for you, Dr. Wandia, to just probably help just to the kids and their futures, but to the health in its poor structure, what that means for the teachers, what that means for the kids, and for our education
is based, which we did not question. Now, talking of parents, this idea of parental involvement, that children are misbehaving because the parents are not in their lives. This is an idea that had been in the church circles for the last 20 years. And it was a way of explaining away the collapse of that. It's not that they don't want to be their children, it's that they are hustling also, and they are struggling to make ends meet. So, and that ideology is a very middle class one, where you're talking about people who work 8 to 5.
Yes.
It doesn't apply to pastoralists, farmers, Mama Mboga, who has to wait for people to come out of the office to buy her hamburgers.
Yes.
She's going to go home at 7, at the best.
Or even 11.
Or even 11, because she's selling to people who are coming out of the office.
Yes.
So that idea was not questioned. It was taken wholesale into the curriculum. And so we came out with this fantasy of, oh, you know, our children will be well behaved if the parents are in their lives, but not thinking that parents are in their children's lives in different ways. Shoshos are in their lives, the village is in their lives. So why did you decide that it's the nuclear family only that can raise children?
It's a very Christian sort of
Christian evangelical idea. So that was the first one. The second idea is the idea that education is like an investment. You pour in something and you get something out. But that's not how education is. And this is something I have to struggle with when I'm teaching every time I'm in class, that there are things students will get out of my class that I had not planned for. They'll see things that I had not seen, or they might not understand what I'm saying today. And this is something I always have to prepare myself for, because I teach very heavy stuff. But they get it 2 years after they've left university, they've started working, and they're like, oh, this is what she was saying. So the human mind get. But this philosophy has been hanging around education circles for a very long time. And people have questioned it, but that questioning has not been mainstreamed. So what CBC now came up with is this fantasy that if I teach a child this, I can expect A, B, C, D from that child, and I should be able to test it. So that's where competence is. That if I teach a child about Mekatilili Wamenza, I can dictate what she's going to understand. And then I can test it, and I can show the evidence of what she got. So that's the premise of CBC. So the problem with that kind of thinking is that you have to narrow what you teach. You also have to make the textbooks the students have to fill in the textbooks so that you guarantee that what I am teaching has been learned.
Is what is learned.
Is what is learned. So it's a very controlled kind of philosophy that does not allow children the freedom to learn anything and everything
But Mwalimu,
from the system.
how expansive is expansive? Because even within education systems that allow for this expansive sort of like model of learning, how then do you what a person has learned, what a person has retained, or should that even be the point?
That should, at least I don't think it should be the point. But also, you see, when you allow teachers to set their assessments in the class, they are now the ones who can set their assessments and see, is it working the way I wanted? But you see, now that has been taken over by the government. And the problem with the government doing all the assessments is that they're all standardized. There's no room for the teacher to tweak and, shift things around, understand her students, tailor. There's no room for that because the assessment is going to be done by the government and the assessment is standard. But the third thing that was wrong with the third idea is that you can fix the economy through the school system. You cannot. As the lawyers have found out, as the medics have found out, you cannot use the school system to fix the economy. And you see, you can now, to your question about open-ended, when you have an open-ended curriculum, if the economy is working, people don't panic. They know, okay, I'm here learning medicine. If it doesn't work, I can get a job in public health. If it doesn't work, I can get a job in, medical journalism. There are options.
Yes.
And those options are available because the economy is good. But if the economy is bad, then people have to learn like cutthroat and get into the only few careers that are there.
So do you believe CBC is locking people?
It is. So the thing is now, on top of that, then the government wanted to say, we don't want people who have grades for law not going for law school because that's a political problem. So let's prevent them from entering the pathway that would send them to law school. So you introduce a JSS and you tell people choose. So in 844 it was different because in 844 I did all the 8-10 subjects. If medicine doesn't work, I can go to BA history. You're flexible with your grades. Now with the CBC, it's decided at JSS. So all of you, if you come to the end,
scary.
It's very
This
is what scared me the most. That and the parental involvement was what scared me most about CBC. And I asked those questions. I said, why can't you just let people take many subjects? If they don't enter university, at least they are flexible. But now you tie them down to a pathway so early. What happens if, and you're a kid, you barely know. Me, I wanted to be a lawyer. Now I'm so glad I'm not. But you fix people to pathways when the system and there's no pathways. So that you open up the system so that people can be flexible. Somebody can do the subjects they're interested in, and that way they build their interest and they notice that, I'm interested in physics, computer science, and also drawing. I can combine the three of them.
And create a new profession that perhaps nobody has even thought of.
Yeah. That's not being allowed in CBC. CBC, you choose your pathway and you stick to it. It's not going to work because the economy is not like that, but it will cause a lot of frustration to the children who are coming out of the system.
Okay. Now that you've said that, I think, Jan, you could take us through maybe the comments that we're getting regarding the system.
So there are a few comments here, and then I have a test for both of you. Okay. But let me read the comments. So Joshua Maka says, in Kenya we have miseducation, not education. Then there's Davis Obatsa, who's made a couple of comments, and he and Joshua are having a bit of a back and forth here. He says, I think the most prevalent issue with policymakers is that they aren't able to come up with unique solutions to problems unique to us, but they copy-paste work from other systems. You're speaking to my favorite expression, you know, it's Sabbath for the people, not people for the Sabbath. And then I think sometimes we create systems because we've seen them work elsewhere, and we think, aha, this is what we must do. Let us be like the Americans.
Fun fact, CBC was apparently like a combination of like the South African system a little bit and the American system, and it's like, have you looked around? Like, what are you talking about?
You know, it's crazy. It's crazy, and it goes on. So there's, in Kenya, we suffer from anti-intellectualism, courtesy of miseducation, and hyper-religiosity. Yes, hyper-religiosity. And then Delta Charlie comes back and says, this is what Mwalimu Wandia was saying about the humanities and the arts. So you see, not all of the things that you say, people are listening, right? The conversation was shut down and people never gave it much attention, if any. So now it's maths. It's very sad. Davis Obatsa, you know, he agrees with you. He says that 844 was way more flexible, though. I mean, you could be anybody and be anything. And Delta Charlie then comes back and says, all those kids under CBC, they're really unfortunate. All those subjects under 844 were and still are relevant. Even if you don't pursue a social science pathway, you still need the knowledge, which was one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but well, at least one of the basic. Yeah, it's a very reductivist way of sort of like educating people. But look, we're coming to the end of the show, and I wanted, because you said something about values. I'm hoping for a bit of a, so this is what we've said our values are versus what we actually have as values in the education system, right? So I just ChatGPT'd, like, you know, a summary of all of our values as per, you know, the Kenya Constitution. So the game is this, right? I say a value and you say what the value actually, what value either opposite to that value is, right? Or whether that value actually exists in large amounts in Kenya, all right? That's a game. So I'll start with you, Justine.
Okay.
Patriotism.
I don't think it exists.
At all?
It exists on a level that's not interpreted as patriotism. I think people conflate patriotism with their love for a politician.
We have a patriot here.
We do have a patriot, but patriotism would be, Dr. Wandia should not be the exception.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. National unity as a value. That's what we've put down in our constitution. Do we practice that as a value in Kenya?
No.
What do we practice?
Division. Division, especially identity and class. So, like, this CBC is a class divide. Yeah, you're giving different education
to different people.
Yeah.
And expecting them to all compete on the same plane. Okay. The rule of law.
As a value?
As a value.
No.
What do we have?
I think it's anarchy from the most part. And
oh my gosh.
And I think it's not just people not respecting the rule of law. It's people who are even supposed to uphold it that they're at the forefront of dismantling it, of using it against the people who fully understand it and are willing to teach as many other people to understand and comply with it.
Okay.
So if the people in power are willing to beat down at it, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Interesting, interesting. Last one, because there's many. Democracy and participation of the people. Do you think that's a value that we espouse? Not really? Not at all?
I was actually thinking about it when I was coming here. Okay, the Constitution says we need public participation, but public participation was not honored in the CBC. We were not consulted. We were coming and giving us their views. So what has been happening of late is that public participation on paper. It's in the gestures, but it's not in the actual substance.
Like to check a box.
Yeah, it's just to check a box and say, yeah, we talked to people, but it's not a genuine engagement and conversation that makes us all be part of whatever is being done.
I want to ask Justine and Dr. Wandia, let's try and, not for the sake of it, but really engage with this question. What gives you hope, right, that someday, somehow, we shall turn a corner and we will find the kinds of students, the kinds of academics, the kind of system underpinned by the kinds of values that you're talking about not existing today? What gives you hope that that will happen? Or do you have hope?
I have hope.
Yes.
Okay, before Dr. Wandia answers,
Yes.
I actually had like a similar.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Ask
I had
it.
a similar question, and I think it still goes to you.
Yeah.
I had written down, what does good education look like? Because I think it kind of encapsulates.
Possibly even a better
Jan's
question.
question.
Yes.
Yeah. What does that look like for you?
Good education is access to information and conversation, those two, and in as many places as possible. So it should not only be the school system. It should be libraries, parks, forests, sports,
Yes.
arts, everywhere where people can gather and get access to information and conversation and do things together. That, for me, is education. And I think part of why our school system, let me put it that way, part of why our school system is in a mess is because Kenyans don't have access to education in other spaces. The arts are not doing very well. People can't find concert halls. We don't have libraries. We have no stadia. You know, sports is an education.
It is.
You're educating, you're teaching your body to do certain things, and people come and appreciate what you're doing, and they have conversations and they enjoy being with one another. So that's an education in and of itself. So when you're seeing all these spaces being underfunded and sabotaged, I think it's also part of our education problem. So people come to the school for everything, and the school cannot provide it. But more than that, even the school is being, narrowed so that very little education happens. Yeah.
Oh, man.
That is that's such a good answer. Allow me to just give you a round of applause, because I couldn't put that into words. Because one of the things that's like a big driving factor for me, I am a stand-up comedian. I didn't tell you this up top. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm a political satirist and a political commentator. And everything I was able to do was because 844 was structured like that. I just knew random things. I thought I was going to be an interior designer. It did not work out. I shifted my whole career, just started doing comedy and like really worked hard at it, regardless of the spaces not existing. But because of the community we have, we're able to do more shows, and people come to our shows, and we've been able to do like satirical pieces on stage, and people come there and they're like, oh, I didn't know this, or like the thing that you said about information, conversation and community, like it's literally that in real time.
Yeah.
And you just affirming that means that we really need more Dr. Wandias in the world, just so it doesn't end with the knowledge that you have.
Fantastic. That's a really great example. Look, Dr. Wandia, I you know why I love having conversations with you, or even just reading from you online, is because every time I assume I know something, you challenge the basis of it, and I have to go back and think, well, gosh, what has this person actually told me? And that's why I enjoy the sort of like practice of public intellectualism that you do, because it really does, when you're ready for it, when you're, and I don't say I'm humble all the time, but when you're ready for it, it really does help you ground yourself and remind you to be humble in not knowing. You don't know all of the things that you think that you know. You know, you don't know what you don't know, basically.
Yeah.
And to that, I just want to say thank you for that. If you ever feel like you are drained in this conversation, just keep speaking. You have no idea how many people you're encouraging. Just from the comments here, you can see the people who've been listening to you for a long time. And my final question is: what are you reading? What literature? Oh, wait. You can tell us what you're reading now.
What you're watching.
Or what you're watching, and what book to you describes what we're seeing in Kenya? The 3 questions. We're not supposed to ask double-barreled or triple-barreled questions. So what are you reading? What are you watching? What book to you describes where we are in Kenya?
Oh dear, that's a hard one. I just got a literature book from short stories from Congo, so I'm looking forward to reading that. But I've been, for a class that I'm teaching this semester, I've been looking at Kenyan literature, how our consciousness has been evolving. So I started with Gowe, then Imbuga, then Binyavanga, Ivonowor. So sort of see what is the thread in what they are saying. So that has been very rewarding for me. I've also decided to start reading on Somalia, Eritrea, and Sudan.
Interesting.
So I'm just finishing a book on Somalia's first president, who apparently was a Democrat. I didn't even know. So that's been exciting, finding out something about our neighbors. What book describes what's happening in Kenya now?
That you've read or are reading or have heard described, yeah.
Is it Kenya or the education system?
Whichever you pick.
Oh wow, I'm not reading a lot of dysfunctional things. I'm reading a lot of history because I'm now understanding, I'm trying to understand what are the interests in and who is sabotaging Africa. That's where my mind is. So that's why I was doing this, the Somalia book that I was reading. So I was reading even Rasna's book on Somalia and the UN.
Or Rasnawara.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think, yes. I think her book on the UN is a perfect description of what's wrong with our government. Yeah, it's just complete dysfunction of bureaucracy, people who have forgotten the people whose lives they affect and who are hostile to the truth. And so when innocent people like Rasnawara was, she innocently pointed out that some things were not going right. And she got surprised by the reaction. She thought she was helping, but she was crushed. So I think that her books, especially the ones on her books are what I would say represent what is happening in Kenya. I'm so sad she's not here today. R.I.P. Rasna. Yeah, but I think there's a way in which her writing captured the dysfunction of states.
Wow.
It's not specific to Kenya, but I think it applies.
Okay.
So,
well,
as
my gosh. Okay, so what Rasnawara reading list?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
So, as we wrap up this show, I don't want it to end on like, oh, like everyone is in dysfunction. But what's something that either a parent or a teacher can do to lean into making the education experience a little easier on them? Just like 2 sentences or like a sentence or something that's just to encourage people who are still out there and they're fighting. Because I know Dr. Wandia is not the only one. There's so many people who look up to you, and there's so many other people in their own spaces also doing incredible work. And how can they continue the work that they're doing? And just like how not to despair even in the face of everything that's going on. And I think I would like a comment from you, Dr. Wandia, and from you, Jan, because you're a parent. You know how this feels like. And because you have students also, for that to be able to impact.
Okay, for Kenyans who have finished school and are in the workplace, be excellent. Aki, the system doesn't want us to be excellent, but be excellent. Just do it. History will remember you. That's the hope. History is going to remember you. Please do not give in to the mediocrity. Just be excellent. It will be hard, but history is rewarding. It will reward you. For parents, stories. That's all I say. Stories, 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 stories. Tell your child stories. Take them for storytelling. Buy them storybooks. And most of all, tell them stories about your own life. Take them to Shosho for stories about her life. Because what that does is that it expands the child's world. And what CBC is doing is narrowing it. So what you want to do is not give in to that narrowing, it's expand it. Tell your stories to your child, your first heartbreak, your first injury, your how we used to, I don't know whether you don't seem, things are changing. So that is what I would say. And they will remember those stories when they finish school. They might not remember them when they are struggling with the textbooks and the homework. But once they finish, those are the stories they will remember.
Oh man.
That's really beautiful.
Well, now you've just said tell stories, and I started remembering the stories that my folks used to tell us about the first date, how my mzee took my mom for a date, and Sprite was all he could afford. But he made that Sprite look so good, like he talked it up. And they rode the bus the whole day because it was cheap, right? And they couldn't sit at a restaurant, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, and so they rode the bus the whole day. Anyway, I mean, such great advice. Those are such nice stories, actually.
Yeah.
So, okay, so for me as a parent, so what do I tell my kids? Okay, I always tell them, especially during exam season, right? Work hard. What they're doing is trying to test, you know how hard you can work. But I'm not interested in your grade. I'm interested in your effort. I'm interested in you showing me that you've done the very best that you can. Whether your very best is 10% or it's 90%, show me that you can, show me that your effort. And for me, because this is what has rewarded me, most of my life. Obviously, there's people who've built and poured into me, etc. But I don't consider myself a particularly talented journalist. I consider myself a person who worked hard, right? Who worked hard at the things that I was interested in. And the effort, the dividend of my effort is this, is Africa Uncensored, is having these conversations that we can have, etc. And, and again, I'm not to toot my own horn, these are the things that I tell my kids. This is where I started. This is how I started this organization. This is where I am today. There are setbacks, but every time, I apply myself, it's, as Deadpool says, maximum effort, right?
Absolutely.
So those are my 2 cents.
I remember once saying that John Alanamu loves us. You can tell from his journalism. It's almost like a gift of love.
Oh. Well, yes, that's true.
It's absolutely true.
Thank
and
you.
I love what both of you have said. Me, I'm not a parent. I'm not a teacher. I am a comedian.
But you give birth to jokes.
Yes,
Justine.
I do birth some good jokes. I'm gonna try and do my closing remarks. And I know right now in the education sector, the area of this triangle of sadness is a big like it's zero. Like that's what it feels like. It's like area in Kenya is like equals length times y. That's what we're there's no width, it just keeps spiraling down. But there's so many people out there who are doing the good work. And you have to figure out how to keep keep redirecting your compass to people who are doing the work. Those are the people who are your true north. Not hype men, not people who are having a fleeting moment with your taxpayer money. Those are not people who you should be looking up to. You should always redirect your compass to people who are doing the work, and I think you can never go wrong with that. So I'd like to say thank you so much, Dr. Wandia, for joining us today. Your insight and your work in teaching, and I'm pretty sure your students really, really appreciate you and everything that you do, because I fully remember, I think it's a week back, when you shared my work, and I was like, what do you mean Dr. Wandia shared my work? And I felt like in that moment there was a mirror.
By the way, it's a page marker for real. For real. You and me, I remember the time you shared. I was like, hey, I polish my English.
So it's really, really highly appreciated.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, Jan, do you have anything to say, especially considering Tom is not here?
Mukhwans, Bwana, why do you keep leaving us? Always jet set to globe trotting, and
Yes.
we miss you, my dear brother, my dear small brother.
Yes.
We hope for a great show next week. Obviously, there's things to look forward to. We're getting into budget season over the next couple of months. We're getting to a very interesting and testy time in our politics, but we also are observers to one of the most interesting sea changes in history, I think, at least over these couple of years. This is that, you know, that expression where it says that there's years in which nothing happens, but there's weeks in which everything happens in politics. I feel like that's what we're living through. So nothing other than to say, you know, thank you for following us. Look forward to the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about next week. Thank you to you, Dr. Wandia. Thank you to everybody who's commented here. There are a couple of more. Let me see if I can squeeze one or two in. Okay. This one might open a conversation, but I'm not going to open it. AI and technology will be the great equalizer. Amazing panel and conversation. He has just given us something to talk about. Then in terms of reading lists, Kiama Kahudhu says that he's reading How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. I think that's a recommendation. Let's see if there was anything else. Yes, Davis Obatsa was playing the game along with us, and when I said rule of law as a value, he said probably privilege, rule of privilege.
I had actually thought that was in my mind.
Interesting,
Privilege, yeah.
interesting. So Davis, you have kindred spirits. Yeah? So nitaachia hapo.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jan. I've been your lead co-host, Justine Wanda, with my
small co-host
today, Jamila Namu, and the wonderful Dr. Wandia. Please follow at The Big Picture African Censored on Instagram, on TikTok, on X. No to Elon Musk again. But I hope you join us next week for another wonderful edition, and good night.
Bye-bye.
The issue at CB is kind of systemic and it's deep-rooted because it's not like this is the first time it's happening.
For years, law students have struggled to pass the bar exam, which is surprising considering the entry requirements. In order to study law, a student would need a C+ on average in KCSE with at least a B in English or Kiswahili. In order to even qualify for the Advocates Training Program, they have to pass the pre-bar exam. So, these aren't exactly the kind of students you'd expect to struggle with exams now, are they?
The Kenya School of Law and the Council of Legal Education have rubbished claims that they have intentionally ensured students fail their bar exams.
But this time round, there's something that triggered the students to know there's something that has been happening behind closed doors.
So it is literally a public institution that preys on the very public it serves for its own survival.
So the issue of trying to make it as if we don't read or we're that stupid doesn't make sense.
People have actually come out in a multitude of students are actually